Juliet, why would someone want to listen to this episode of Serenity Now about procrastination?
I believe that somebody needs to listen to this podcast because at this very moment they're procrastinating.
Good answer.
I'm just kidding. I think it humanizes the experience. I think when you get people together that you respect, admire, that have done cool things, that get to be in really cool rooms, that the imagination, the conversation is so rich for learning from experiences. And I think most of us can find somebody that has had a similar experience, that has something to say about it. And in this type of forum and setting and recognizing the audience that you capture, it's community. It brings you together and it says, hey, yeah, I do that too. And I shouldn't. So I should work on that. How do you tackle that? And I guess I didn't realize that was a part of procrastination, or that I'm avoiding a negative experience. And I never thought of that. And sometimes it's just this light bulb moment and typically in like the simplest sentences, that it's enough to capture a change, a reversal, some sort of harmony in your day. And that's what I have received from listening to many episodes of Serenity Now. And it's this sisterhood, it's this community that just allows you to let your guard down and just listen to your sisters. And that's why.
Hi, and welcome to Serenity Now, a place for entrepreneurs to ask questions, learn, get connected, and be inspired. Join us as we talk about all things business and the search for the ever-elusive Serenity Now in both business and personal life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Serenity Now for Entrepreneurs. I'm Rita Kim, your host, and I'm joined by my fellow co-host, Peggy. Welcome. And today we've got a really inspiring and amazing guest to join us through a hot topic today. Our inspiring guest is a fellow female founder, and she's the owner of Kid Drop. Juliet, welcome.
Thank you, Rita. So happy to be here. Happy to see you again, Peggy. I've had the privilege of being on your podcast before, so it's an exciting day for me. I am a founder out of Fort McMurray, Northern Alberta. Started a transportation service to support busy families by taking their kids to and from school, daycare, activities, playdates, birthday parties. The list goes on and on. So it's a fun topic for me, procrastination, as a mom of two and always on the go.
So today we're going to talk about procrastination, which I'm sure we've all done, but do we all know what it really means? I don't have a definition, so I'm going to read it, and hopefully I can get through this okay. Science explains procrastination as a fight sparked between two parts of the brain when it's faced with an unpleasant activity or assignment. It's a battle of the limbic system, the unconscious zone that includes the pleasure center, and the prefrontal cortex, essentially your internal planner. When the limbic system wins, that's your pleasure center, which is often, the result is putting off for tomorrow what could and should be done today, which offers temporary relief from the unpleasant feeling of needing and, for whatever reason, not wanting to do something. That's the definition. I think we've all experienced it. Rita, you have some examples?
I wanted to make sure we all were on the same page. I'm fairly confident I don't actually need examples for once, but putting off chores or delaying tasks like submitting your reports or assignments, or just even getting up, avoiding difficult conversations. That's a big one, I think, too. Just pretty much everything across the board can fall into procrastination.
Yeah, I think we see that in our personal life and in our business life.
There's a lot to capture in a day, right? And there's tasks that are repetitive and sure you can schedule and plan ahead. And there's things that just come up, right? And I think that sometimes we don't realize that we're procrastinating because we just redirect our focus on something else that seems more important at the time, but we don't actually prioritize that task and seemingly I think you're avoiding whatever it is that you're trying to get done because something else can move you in a different direction because deep down inside you're trying to avoid that task.
And always going to the more enjoyable things. You know, it's easier to do something you like than it is to do something you really don't like. As Rita mentioned, the conversation bit, I admit, guilty of that one. not having conversations because they're difficult, not addressing issues within the workplace because it's difficult, and sometimes thinking it'll just go away when it really actually doesn't go away. It probably gets larger, bigger, harder.
Maybe it was more hoping that it would go away, right? And so sometimes I think maybe is it fear? Is it a mental block? Is it laziness? Some people have said you're lazy. Why can't you just do it? Just get to work, just get it done. But if it's fear, that can kind of be like a barrier and leads to procrastination. And then it goes to your inaction or maybe to some sort of pleasure thing. I mean, I binge watching something, or a series or something, or just social media scrolling yourself to death. And then this guilt thing sets in, right? And then you've got this vicious circle. And then you kind of get upset at yourself and you're like, why did I waste all this time? And it really wasn't as hard, or maybe whatever I built up in my mind. And now, I'm mad at myself. Like, why did I do that? Does that sound like something that you've gone through at all?
Definitely for me, Rita. I think that we're really good at justifying our actions. Do you know what I mean? And if you're ever in that crunch where you've delayed something and then it actually has worked out in your favor because for whatever reason, you just crunched down last minute, got it done. You're like, wait, I worked really well under pressure. Maybe that's my thing. And that becomes your habit of you wanting to consistently just, I'll power through it at the end. I mean, sure, there's a time and a place for that. As a university graduate, there's a time and a place for that. But I think, we are creatures of habit. And then so if you find something that works for you, it's hard to break it. And I think that procrastination is one of those topics.
I think it happens to perfectionists too. I think perfectionists not wanting to not be perfect procrastinate on certain issues. And that in itself leads to that whole cycle of procrastination and then guilt or self-shaming or whatever it is that you get into when you do it. Definitely some emotional response for sure.
And why are we so mean to ourselves? I mean, it's not like we're not filling that time being productive in other facets of our lives, right? We spend a lot of time, almost maybe sometimes the equal amount of time that we are procrastinating, beating ourselves up. It's a dark cycle.
It's almost like the time that we take to delay to do it, it could have been accomplished in that time. And the amount of excuses we make for not doing it, we could have had it done in that time. So what's the strategy then? Where do people go to change that, to turn it around?
I did hear something that really helped me with this. And I think that a lot of tasks are thrown our way. And sometimes those tasks are only 5 minutes long, 10 minutes long. If it's something that you're putting off later that really only requires 5 minutes of your time, just do it in the 5 minutes. You'll save yourself all of the remembering and writing it on a list and then saving it for later when, if you had just got it done. And I think that is a lot of the times the case. The task that you're avoiding is actually quite limited in time, and yet we've blown it out for weeks and months.
Do you remember the days when paper landed on your desk? Remember? They always said good time management is to not move that paper a bunch of times, that to take whatever it is that you have to do and deal with it to the extent that you can at that moment in time and move it to the finished or almost finished pile instead of shuffling it around. Well, virtually we can shuffle things too. So it's that act of handling something over and over again and never finishing it that I think is classic procrastination.
Yeah, no, I completely identify with that. One of the other things that used to come up, though, Peggy, when the paper landed on your desk was get it off your desk as soon as you can and onto the next person's desk.
Keep the ball rolling.
Versus just being accountable and responsible. There was two pieces there. It's so funny because we know we have something to get done. We know perhaps there's a deadline. Maybe there's not a deadline. And those are two very different outcomes but you end up still procrastinating. I think one of the things is we should kind of figure out, like, why are we doing this? You mentioned earlier, both of you guys, something about a habit, or it started maybe in uni or in high school because we had to cram because we wanted to go party or we wanted to do something else. And then we had no time left and we had to study, and then you had to, or submit your assignments and you had to get it done. And then it just became a behavior. And it's like, well, I could do it before, and now I can still do it. And then what happens is you get older And then that cramming stuff becomes a little harder, guys. You may not be where I'm at, but it becomes tougher and tougher then.
I noticed it with my kids. I noticed that, they would put things off to the last minute. And then if something came up with their schoolwork that interfered with them completing it in the last minute, then they were in a catastrophe mode. And I always said to them, give yourself a time buffer. Like if it has to be done on Monday, why are we working on it on Sunday night? Admittedly, I did the same. But anyhow, I learned from it. So, I was trying to tell them that you can't always control all the factors that might interfere with you getting that done. So give yourself time so that you don't end up at that stress. I made my daughter sit up one night, grade 6 or 7 project, and she goes, but I have to go to bed. I'm like, no, you don't. Have a Coke and some candy, and you can stay awake and get that project done. It probably wasn't, the best parenting, but I wanted her to understand if you leave it to the last minute, then things like this are going to happen. You can't type as fast as you thought you could.
No, 100%. I see it all the time in both myself. Yes, I will acknowledge that, as well as my kids. It's funny though, Sam doesn't have any of this. You have a task and then it's like, let's go get it done. Like come hell or high water, you could be dying. You could be like, at the end, you can't breathe, but it's going to get done because I said it's going to get done today. And so then there's that opposite person, right? And then I have to live with him. And I'm just like, maybe we're okay, just chill, I got a sniffle. It's okay. But no, it has to get done. So it's almost like, we just need a little bit of a balance between the two. Just give me a little bit of procrastination, because sometimes you actually need to take a moment to process. Like when we're running large financial models, you can start it and then set it aside, and then you actually kind of gotta like swish it in the mouth and kind of just process it versus just madly attacking it, because you just need to work through some of the pieces of the puzzle, and you actually come out to a better solution if you give yourself that time to perhaps take a break or procrastinate, whatever you want to call it, and just get your mind off of it. Your brain is still working on the task, right? It's just doing it in a little bit more of a relaxed way versus, being on it. So I find that there could be some sort of a positive sometimes when you take a break on a task.
I think, though, that you've given yourself adequate time to complete the task, given that you want a break. And that's key. If you procrastinate to the last minute, you have to jam. Your work could be less accurate, less effective, etc., because you haven't given yourself time to let it stir, think about it unconsciously, subconsciously, whatever. And you're cramming to get it done. So are the results as good? Maybe not. So I do think that if you're a procrastinator, just build a buffer in. Build a buffer. Give yourself a little time buffer so that it's not a catastrophe at the end. It's just getting done ahead of the schedule.
I think you're right. And that's why we could have that time to, kind of swirl around the mouth and, just have that moment to process, because we had some time on our hands built in the process there. And I think that if we have that mindset, maybe the other thing we could do is just go, well, we know this is a big report or assignment or something that we have to submit. And I know I want to make sure it's really good, but why don't you just go ahead and do it? Like just run it and don't worry about it being perfect. Just do it. And then that way, at least you've got kind of the first draft done. Again, giving yourself, that time buffer. So using that same piece, then later you can come back after you process it and then you can edit it and make it a little stronger versus having a one-shot deal at the 11th hour and then submit.
So true. And I think too, sometimes we have to start thinking about things at the end instead of at the beginning, like what is my desired outcome for this project, right? What is it for? Like, what am I really stressing about? And then make intentional acts towards that. Because sometimes I feel if you set a date, a time, for this 1 hour, I'm not going to be interrupted. And even if it's just a brainstorming portion of it or just getting a grip of it, I think that there's a consistency and an intention, and also recognizing, well, what is the severity of this? Because I think at the end of the day, most things that we think are really serious are not that serious. We take them very serious in that moment. And it depends on what it is you're procrastinating about. But I know that the bigger ones, the ones that can linger for months and possibly even years, it's you have more time than you think that you can work that buffer in, even if you think that you're on a deadline or not, especially if you do want to have the presentation that you want with the desired outcome that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think the key in managing procrastination can come down to time management. Although the scientists say it's more of a coping mechanism, procrastination is a coping mechanism for bad emotional or mood feelings. But at the same time, time management is a way to mitigate it, I guess. You wouldn't make it go away, but at least you can mitigate it. Scheduling yourself, calendars, deadlines that aren't crash deadlines, that kind of thing could absolutely help. I don't know. Do you guys have any other ideas?
I think all of those techniques that we're talking about, the time blocking and turning the phone off and, making sure that we have that time set aside. But if you block yourself an hour to do something, then as a potential procrastinator, are you going to begin right on time, or are you going to wait till again, the last half hour? So maybe give yourself 10 minutes or 5 minutes to start the task. And then at least you can say, I've started. I would change the clocks around for the kids and they'd go mental. Be like, yeah, I know. And so, yeah, my car is always ahead, right? So everyone's freaking out and panicking. And I'm like sitting there going, it's all good, right? And why are you so relaxed? Oh, we have no time. Well, we're good, actually. I'm so glad we've got actually another half hour. What? You did it? Oh, you did it again. But now they all have their phones and all that stuff. So it's a little harder to kind of trick them into this kind of stuff. But it was easier a little earlier.
My kids always ask, is that the real time? Because I always set the clocks to, is that the real time? I still wake up to my alarm clock and I look at it and I think, how many minutes different is this one?
Yeah.
I have always done that.
Or you do the two things where set the two alarms, one at 5 o'clock and then the other at 5:15, right? So then you feel better because you're like, I got my 15 minutes, I got my 15 minutes. So, and you know what? Sometimes that's huge.
So true. I think one aspect that I think could really help. I know it's helped me in different situations, and having a workout routine. It's like I strive for that. Wonderful, but it just doesn't always work. But I think sometimes if you just take the 10 minutes of time buffer, let's just say, even just to go for a walk and get in the sun and just get in the right space of clarity, something about putting everything aside so that you can just really focus on this one task. And it's amazing how time outside really gives you perspective. Or taking your shoes off and putting your feet on grass, they call it grounding. It doesn't take much time. It's practicing gratitude. It doesn't take a lot to just center yourself around the most positive space to start what we're avoiding, procrastinating.
I love that. I do that all the time. That is definitely one of my coping strategies. The other thing I do is I pick up the phone and I call Peggy. And then she'll be like, what's going on? And I'm like, well, I got this work to get done, but I thought I'd say hi to you first. So we need that partner that we can pick up the phone and call, and then they know you and they're like, okay, we've done our chat. Let's get back to work now, right? Let's get going. And, so sometimes that accountability partner is another piece that we could use. I think at this point, we kind of want to go around the room and do a bit of a quick fire, something that resonated, an extra thought or something else that we wanted to share. I'll start with Peggy and, give us one last awesome piece of advice.
Oh, well, I don't know if I have advice, but I do know that when I was young, I did exactly what I told my kids not to do. I told them not to leave things to the last minute. But I did it when I was young. So it is something can be unlearned, because I think it's a learned behavior to procrastinate, and it has to take will. You have to have a desire not to do it. And I think sometimes we're motivated by bad emotions in a way, and that we don't want to feel them again. So maybe finding a way to not experience that is a good way to deal with procrastination, because if you don't like that negative feeling, perhaps you learn strategies to make you not feel that negative feeling of your own little self-defeating, kind of talk about, I didn't do it, I should have done it, I wished I'd done it, I left it too late, I'm, struggling to get it done properly, etc. try to think about that. I mean, unlearn that behavior. If you have a desire to not procrastinate, it can be unlearned.
Very well said. And I will say that one thing that I learned from my dad, who was always a very hardworking man his whole life, through many different career paths and traveled for work, and in his moments of leisure, which were very few, and we would gather, he would always say, I want you to know that the work will always be there. You need to find moments to rest. Like the work will be waiting, whether it's this project or this assignment or whatever the task is, it will always be there. So recognize that there's times for rest, there's times to put the pedal to the metal, and it's all in balance. So if it's the work, the task list of 30 things, it's always going to be there. So pick 3, tackle those. Tomorrow will come and then you will have an opportunity to do 3 more, but the work will always be there. So just don't lose sight of that.
Perfect. That was awesome. I can't wait to meet your dad one day there, Juliet. I think my final bit. So because I'm kind of a bit of a numbers person, I've got 2 things. One is I started to research about procrastination, and from various sources, from Jordan Peterson to a whole bunch of other folks, people can procrastinate from up to like 2 to 6 hours a day. So if you actually do the math on that, then you kind of multiply it out for the week, and then you kind of do it for the year, and it could be upwards of 50 days that are lost. So that freaked the crap out of me. So because I like numbers. So then once I started calculating, I was like, I don't want to lose 50 days. Or if I have 50 days, I want those 50 days back and go have fun with those 50 days. The second thing that I wanted to share was everyone does it. We all fall into it. And I think it's also important for us to forgive ourselves instead of that guilt shame cycle that we keep going through. Acknowledge that we did it, forgive ourselves. And then, like Peggy, you said earlier, take a deep breath and let's try again tomorrow. Like sometimes you just let go. Somebody, as I was doing the research, had mentioned this. It's like procrastination is about accountability or making a date with yourself. And, if you made a date with yourself at 8:00 to work on something and then you didn't show up and you kept doing this over and over again, how would that person feel? Not so good, right? And, instead of letting yourself down, instead of treating yourself like that, why don't we treat ourselves a little bit better? Now, when we set our tasks, give yourself maybe some of that buffer time that we were talking about. Give yourself that, let go of that feeling of guilt that we were talking about. And then maybe just small segments to start with to get it going. No matter who you are, I'm sure that we've all gone through this. We don't have all the answers. We don't claim to have all the answers. We just know that we've gone through this. Enjoy yourself and plan your day with your work, but also with some sort of reward in there as well every single day so that your brain can be happy with that. So remember, it's just not about being perfect. It's just about making progress and taking those small steps. So happy you came back to join us. And we hope that this episode can help maybe some entrepreneurs that you know, and perhaps this has given you some serenity now. Thanks, guys. See you next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and picked up some good tips and best practices that would benefit your entrepreneurial journey. Remember, none of the content in this podcast should be relied upon as standard legal or business advice. Always consult a professional for your specific business. You may know someone who could benefit from this podcast. Please share it with your business community, and perhaps it can give an entrepreneur you know some serenity now.